The cold snow cut across Tyler's face as he tried to move faster through the pine forest. The bobcat in his arms was growing weaker, his body trembling not only from his wounds, but also from the bone-chilling cold. Tyler pulled his jacket zipper higher, trying to share his body heat with the small creature. Ember's amber eyes looked up at him, growing dimmer with each passing minute. "Hang on," Tyler whispered, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. "We'll make it back to the cabin. Grandpa will know what to do." He had never felt such responsibility before, a life completely dependent on him. Tyler clutched the animal tighter, feeling his weak heartbeat, knowing that every minute counted. The teenager tried to run faster, despite his exhausted legs and the cold seeping into his bones. 3 months ago, things had been very different. Tyler stood in the principal's office, hands still cuffed behind his back. He didn't bother looking at the dried blood on his lip or acknowledging his mother's disappointed expression. This was the third fight this semester. But Tyler didn't feel guilty. No one understood him. His parents' divorce had taken away Tyler's last anchor. And now his mother had to go abroad for work for 6 months. Her rebellious son had only one place to go, Grandpa Jack's cabin in the remote Yukon wilderness. The rental car stopped in front of a wooden cabin beneath the pine canopy. Tyler stepped out, his backpack over his shoulder, feeling the cold pierce through his thin jacket. No internet, no friends, nothing. Just snow and an old man he barely knew. Jack appeared at the cabin door, a tall man with a silver beard and piercing blue eyes. He said nothing, just nodded to his daughter-in-law and observed his grandson with an appraising look. His hands were rough and calloused, but Tyler noticed how gently he placed an injured bird into a small box before coming out to greet them. When Tyler's mother left, he felt completely abandoned. The sound of the car engine faded away, disappearing, leaving only the sound of wind blowing through the pine tops and the distant call of strange birds. On the first night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He decided to sneak outside, hoping to find a spot with phone reception to text his friends. Under the moonlight, the forest was silent and mysterious. Tyler followed a small path, going a little further from the cabin. Suddenly, he saw Jack. He was standing at the edge of the forest, placing a plate of food on the ground. From the darkness, a small fox approached, cautious but not afraid. Jack sat still, patiently waiting. The fox eventually came close, eating from the plate while he sat watching in silence. Tyler stood motionless, not daring to breathe heavily. This was a side of his grandfather he had never seen. There was something in the way he interacted with the wild animal, a respect, a connection, that made Tyler curious. When he snuck back to the cabin, Tyler couldn't help wondering about Jack's life. In the drawer next to the bed, he found some old articles. They wrote about a biologist who had spent many years studying wildlife in the Yukon. Next to the article was another photo, a younger Jack kneeling beside a gray wolf. No barriers, no cages, just the man and the wild animal in a rare moment of trust. That night, lying in bed, Tyler began to see his grandfather differently. Perhaps this old man wasn't as simple as he thought. A week passed with the slow rhythm of the wilderness. Tyler was still grumpy but starting to get used to the daily chores. Chopping wood in the morning, learning to identify animal tracks at noon, helping Jack repair the cabin in the afternoon. Though he wouldn't admit it, he was beginning to learn many new things. Then one afternoon, everything fell apart. Jack asked Tyler to clean out the storage shed, a dirty and laborious task. Tyler protested vehemently. Months of accumulated anger exploded into bitter words. He accused his grandfather of everything, from making him live in this wilderness to the feeling of being abandoned by his entire family. Jack stood there, silently bearing the anger. His blue eyes reflected deep sadness, but there was no anger. This only made Tyler angrier. He wanted a reaction, an excuse to keep hating him. Getting none, Tyler stormed off. He didn't care that it was getting dark, didn't notice the heavy snow starting to fall. He just wanted to escape the cabin, escape that stubborn old man, escape this forced life. The snow fell heavier, wind howling through the mountain pass. Tyler kept walking, each step taking him deeper into the wilderness. When he finally looked back, the cabin had disappeared behind the white curtain of snow. Now, anger gave way to growing fear. The storm came quickly and violently. Tyler suddenly realized he had made a serious mistake. He tried to turn back, but every direction looked the same in the blinding snowstorm. Snowflakes stuck thick on his eyelashes. His clothes soaked and freezing. The snow underfoot was deep. The temperature dropped rapidly. He tried to remember what Jack had taught him about orienteering in the forest, but fear left his mind blank. For the first time, Tyler regretted not paying more attention to his grandfather's lessons. Taking another step forward, Tyler suddenly felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The ice broke with a sharp crack. He fell in, feeling the icy shock as partially frozen water surrounded his legs. Luckily, he only fell in knee-deep and quickly grabbed onto the edge of the ice hole. Heart pounding, Tyler tried to pull himself up, but the ice edge was slippery. Fear rose as he realized the danger of his situation, trapped, soaking wet, in cutting cold. The lessons about hypothermia that Jack had taught suddenly echoed in his mind. As he struggled to hold on and pull himself up, Tyler heard a faint sound from across the ice hole. Through the snow, he saw a creature struggling, its front paws clinging to the ice edge, its lower body submerged in the freezing water. A bobcat. The animal was desperately trying to pull itself up, but with each attempt, the ice edge broke more. In the bobcat's panicked gaze, Tyler saw a fear identical to his own, a creature fighting to survive, alone in the storm. Without thinking, Tyler managed to pull himself out of the hole, then carefully crawled toward the bobcat. His natural reaction was to help, despite it being a dangerous wild animal. In that moment, there was no boundary between human and beast. Just two creatures trying to survive in nature's harshness. Getting closer, Tyler took off his outer jacket, fashioning a crude rope. He threw it toward the bobcat, trying to create a grip point. The animal was terrified, growling weakly, but too exhausted to fight back. These movements reminded him of how Jack had once rescued a bird caught in a net, gentle, patient, respectful. With a final effort, Tyler pulled the bobcat out of the water. The animal lay there, soaking wet and shaking violently, its amber eyes clouded with pain and fear. Without thinking, Tyler took off his inner shirt, wrapping it around the animal. He had no strength left to resist, only whimpering softly when Tyler lifted him. He knew they needed to find shelter immediately. Both would die from cold if they stayed in the storm. But where was the cabin? Every direction was a white blur in the snowstorm. Then Tyler remembered Jack's lesson. Pine trees always have more branches on the south side, where they receive more sunlight. He observed the trees nearby, determined the direction, and began walking, the heavy bobcat in his arms. Every step was a battle. The cold seeped into his marrow. Tyler could no longer feel his fingers and toes, but in his arms, that small life depended on him. Tyler had never felt such a heavy responsibility. Before, he had only cared about himself, but now, another creature's life mattered more than his comfort or safety. Just when Tyler was about to lose hope, a familiar shape appeared through the snow. Jack, with a flashlight and thick coat, was searching for him. The light from the flashlight swept across the snow like a lighthouse in the storm. He saw his grandson clutching a bobcat, and for a moment, surprise was clear on his weathered face. No reproach, no disappointed look, just relief at finding him and a hint of surprise at his action. Tyler briefly explained about the bobcat, teeth chattering from cold. Jack said nothing. He just took off his outer coat, draped it over his grandson's shoulders, then gently took the bobcat. Together they returned to the cabin, fighting the storm and cold, carrying the fragile life they had just saved. Back at the cabin, they placed the bobcat on an old blanket in front of the fireplace. The animal was too weak to resist. Jack examined him carefully, his rough hands touching the wet fur with the expertise of someone familiar with wildlife. The bobcat was suffering from severe hypothermia and had an injured hind leg. Fortunately, Tyler had found him in time. Jack quickly got medicine and bandages, gently tending to the animal's wounds. The bobcat occasionally growled weakly, trying to bite when in pain, but was too weak to do harm. Tyler watched his grandfather with newfound respect. Those rough hands could be surprisingly gentle. He knew exactly what to do, without a moment's hesitation or fear. This was a Jack that Tyler had never seen. Not a grumpy old man, but a man with extraordinary knowledge and skills. Tyler anxiously asked about the bobcat's condition. Jack looked at his grandson with a rare warmth in his eyes. He said they would have to see how tonight went, but the bobcat was a survivor just like him. Tyler felt a strange connection to that comment. Looking at the bobcat, Tyler was drawn to his amber eyes, like smoldering embers under the dim light. Ember, he whispered, naming the animal. A fitting name for a creature with fiery eyes. Jack nodded in approval, saying nothing. He gave Tyler a cup of hot tea and a dry blanket. The teenager sat down beside Ember, watching his weak breathing. A protective feeling, strong and unexpected, rose in his heart. That night, as the fire in the stove radiated heat, Tyler didn't leave Ember's side. He talked to the animal, his voice low and gentle. He told him about city life, about loneliness, about feeling abandoned. Ember lay still, eyes open wide, looking at him, as if understanding every word. In that moment, Tyler felt listened to for the first time in a long while. Jack observed from the corner of the room, saying nothing, but in his old eyes, there was something like quiet hope beginning to flicker. Perhaps his rebellious grandson had finally found something to care about besides himself. In the following days, Ember gradually recovered. The bobcat was still very wild, growling and trying to bite when anyone came near. But with Tyler, he became less aggressive. The boy patiently sat beside him, talking to him for hours, placing food nearby and backing away. Each day, the distance between him and the animal grew smaller. Ember's hind leg was badly injured. Jack wasn't sure if he would ever walk normally again. But the animal had a strong will. He tried to stand up, fell down, then tried again. Tyler began creating small exercises for Ember, pulling a string, overcoming low obstacles, practicing walking a few steps around the room. Gradually, a new routine formed. Tyler woke up early, helped Jack with morning chores, then spent most of his time with Ember. He no longer felt imprisoned in the cabin. Each day brought new progress with Ember, and along with it, Tyler changed too. One night, as Tyler sat reading by the fireplace, Ember slowly dragged himself closer. The teenager didn't move, his heart beating fast. The bobcat came closer until he was just an arm's length away. Then, with hesitation, he put his head down, allowing Tyler's hand to gently touch his ear. In that moment, something in Tyler changed. He felt a connection, a fragile trust from the wild creature, a great responsibility born within him. Tears unexpectedly welled up, and he didn't try to hold them back. This was the first time in a long while that he felt trusted, needed. Jack witnessed that moment from the doorway, and for the first time since Tyler arrived, he smiled. Time passed, winter gradually giving way to the first signs of spring. Snow began to melt. New buds appeared on tree branches. Ember could now move around the cabin, though still with a slight limp. He still maintained his wild nature, allowing no one but Tyler and occasionally Jack to touch him, but had accepted life among humans. Tyler changed too. He was no longer the rebellious kid always angry at the world. He learned from Jack, asked questions about nature and animals, listened to stories about his past. For the first time, he saw his grandfather not as a jailer, but as a teacher, someone who could teach him things he had never known. One evening, Tyler asked Jack if he had ever rescued a wild animal like this before. Jack looked into the fire, his eyes distant. He told about a gray wolf he had rescued many years ago. The wolf had stayed with him for a while, but eventually returned to its pack when the time came. Tyler looked at Ember, curled up by the fireplace. The thought of parting with the bobcat made him feel heavy. He had become too attached to him. But deep down, he knew that Ember didn't belong to the human world. One morning, the sound of a car engine broke the forest's silence. A ranger vehicle parked in front of the cabin. Bradford, the area's chief ranger, stepped out. Tall, with a thick red beard and a stern face, he wasn't an easy man to deal with. Bradford greeted Jack, then announced he had received reports about keeping wildlife in this area. He knew about the Bobcat. Someone had seen Tyler carrying him back in the storm. While Jack invited Bradford inside, Tyler took Ember to the back room, anxiously watching through the door crack. Bradford reminded Jack about the law against keeping wildlife without a permit, especially endangered species like bobcats. Tyler couldn't contain himself. He stepped out, protesting strongly. He explained that Ember was injured, would have died without help. He spoke with a passion he had never had before. No longer senseless anger, but belief in what was right. Bradford listened, his expression shifting from stern to sympathetic. He understood the circumstances, but the law was the law. He announced he would return with official papers next week to take Ember to a wildlife rescue center. After Bradford left, Tyler hurried back to Ember. The bobcat was tense, sensing the anxious atmosphere in the space. Tyler hugged him, an intense protective feeling rising. He couldn't let them take Ember away, but he also knew he couldn't keep him forever. Jack sat down beside him, placing a hand on his grandson's shoulder. He explained that Ember was a wild animal and eventually needed to return to nature. Tyler objected, worried that with his injured leg, Ember wouldn't survive out there. But Jack gently pointed out that they wouldn't know unless they gave him a chance. True love sometimes meant letting go. Tyler looked at his grandfather, then at Ember, truly understanding the meaning of that for the first time. The following week, a spring storm hit, stronger than expected. Rapid snowmelt created a flood risk. Jack worriedly checked the roof, which was showing signs of leakage. He told Tyler to stay inside with Ember before climbing the ladder. Tyler agreed, but still watched his grandfather worriedly. Strong winds made tree branches hit against the roof. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded, followed by a cry of pain. Tyler rushed out. Jack was lying on the ground, a large branch pinning his leg. Blood spread on the melting snow. With unexpected strength, Tyler pulled the branch away, then helped Jack inside. His leg was broken, blood flowing from a deep cut. Tyler applied the first aid knowledge Jack had taught, cleaning the wound, bandaging, and setting the leg. But the situation became serious when Jack developed a high fever from infection. The storm had blocked the roads, making it impossible to get him to a hospital. Tyler found a satellite phone, but the battery was dead, and the storm had caused a power outage, making it impossible to charge. The teenager faced an emergency situation alone. His grandfather unconscious with fever, Ember tense, and outside, the storm still raged. Tyler was no longer the stubborn child. Now his grandfather's life depended on him. Tyler checked the medicine cabinet, found antibiotics and fever reducers. He gave them to Jack, then constantly changed cold, wet cloths on his forehead. Night fell, supplies began to run low. The storm showed no signs of weakening. On the second morning, Tyler discovered Ember sitting by the window, looking outside with a strange expression. The bobcat was restless, his ears moving continuously as if listening to something Tyler couldn't hear. Tyler approached, curious. Suddenly, Ember jumped down, went to the door, then turned back to look at Tyler, as if wanting him to open it. Tyler hesitated. The storm had decreased, but it was still windy and very cold. But there was something in Ember's eyes that made Tyler trust him. He put on his coat and opened the door. Ember immediately ran outside, despite still limping. Tyler followed, uncertain but deciding to trust the animal's instincts. The bobcat led him into the forest, stopping occasionally to ensure Tyler was still following. They walked about 20 minutes before Ember stopped in front of a bush, turning his head back to look at Tyler, expectantly. Tyler moved forward, parting the bushes. Underneath was a snowshoe hare caught in a trap, still alive. Ember had found food for them. Tyler looked at the bobcat with new admiration. He wasn't just dependent on him, but now he was helping him. With the skills newly learned from Jack, Tyler freed the hare from the trap, quickly dressed it. He shared a portion with Ember and took the rest back to the cabin to make soup for Jack. In the days that followed, Ember continued to lead Tyler to places where food could be found: wild raspberry bushes, a stream with fish, and even a bird's nest with eggs. The bond between them deepened, and Tyler realized Ember was saving them in his own way. By the 5th day, the storm completely stopped. Jack woke up, his fever reduced thanks to the medicine and Tyler's diligent care. He was surprised to see how well his grandson had managed. Tyler told him how Ember had helped them find food, how he seemed to understand the situation and had become a protector for both of them. Jack looked at the bobcat with a different expression. Then he looked at his grandson, not hiding his pride. The rebellious teenager had become a responsible and brave young man. What he had tried to teach for weeks had been learned in days of crisis. "I learned from you," Tyler said softly, stroking Ember who lay beside him. "And from Ember." Jack smiled. "Sometimes we learn the greatest lessons from unexpected teachers." 2 days after the storm ended, Bradford returned. He was surprised to see the condition of the cabin and Jack's injured leg. No one had answered the phone during those days, and Bradford had been worried. Tyler recounted everything that had happened, including how Ember had helped them find food and survive the storm. Bradford listened, his expression changing from doubt to respect as he looked at the teenager who had matured so much since their last meeting. "You did well," he said to Tyler, then turned to Jack. "You have a brave grandson, Jack." Bradford examined Jack's leg and confirmed he needed to go to the hospital immediately. He also brought papers to take Ember to the rescue center. When addressing this issue, Bradford became thoughtful. "About the bobcat," he said, "I've spoken with the center's director. They will care for him, but there's a high chance he won't be released back into the wild because of his injured leg. He'll spend the rest of his life in a cage or a fenced reserve." Tyler felt a sharp pain in his heart. The thought of Ember locked in a cage for life was unbearable. He was a creature of freedom, of vast forests and wild mountains. He didn't belong behind artificial walls. "No," he said, his voice determined and calm, no longer the angry rebellion of before. "Ember belongs to nature." Bradford looked at the teenager, then at Jack, who was nodding in agreement. There was something in Tyler's steadfast gaze that made the ranger pause and think. "I've seen him move," Tyler continued, offering clear arguments. "He can hunt. He helped us find food. He can survive. We didn't nurture him to cage him, but so he could return to nature." Bradford thought for a moment. He looked at Ember lying nearby, his amber eyes bright and alert. No longer the weak, injured animal, but a predator who had regained his strength. "There is a reserve nearby," Bradford finally said. "The place has few people, plenty of food, and is protected from hunters. If you think he has a chance..." Jack looked at Bradford with gratitude. "Thank you, Bob." The plan was set. Bradford would help get Jack to the hospital, and Tyler would have a week to prepare Ember before they released him into the reserve. The final week with Ember passed quickly. Tyler spent every possible moment with the bobcat, teaching him the final hunting skills he had learned from Jack. He took him outside more, letting him gradually acclimate to the natural environment. In quiet afternoons, Tyler sat beside Ember on a rock, looking out over the valley below. He told him about his life, about what he had learned, and about the future he was beginning to envision. No longer a future full of anger and rebellion, but one where he could find his place in the world, just as Ember would find his place in nature. The night before releasing Ember, Tyler couldn't sleep. He sat by the fireplace, the bobcat curled up beside him. Tyler stroked his thick fur, feeling his steady, strong breathing. He was no longer the weak creature Tyler had rescued from the ice hole. He had become a healthy predator, ready for life in the wild. But what pained Tyler most was the thought that after tomorrow, he would never see Ember again. The bobcat had become too important a part of his life. He had taught him about patience, about responsibility, about caring for something beyond himself. How could he say goodbye? In that lonely moment, Tyler found himself crying, not from anger or frustration as before, but from a much deeper feeling. Ember looked up, his amber eyes watching him with strange understanding. The bobcat placed a paw on his lap, a gesture he had never made before. Tyler hugged him, feeling his strong heartbeat against his own heart. "Thank you," he whispered into Ember's ear. "Thank you for saving me." Morning came, clear and bright. Bradford had returned with the ranger vehicle, ready to take them to the reserve. Tyler placed Ember in a special cage Bradford had brought, not to imprison him, but to ensure safety during the journey. They drove through muddy roads from melting snow deep into the forest mountains. The reserve was in the northern valley, surrounded by rocky mountains, forming a natural barrier. This was home to many wild animals, including other bobcats. When they arrived, Tyler carried Ember's cage from the car. The bobcat seemed tense, his eyes looking around cautiously. He sensed the change, the smell of deep forest, nature's call. Bradford led them walking a bit further to an open area with scattered rocks and trees. "This is the best spot," he said. "Near water sources, many small prey, and rock caves for shelter." Tyler set the cage down, slowly opening the door. Ember didn't rush out. He sat there, looking at the vast landscape before him, then turned back to look at Tyler. Tyler swallowed his tears, gently removing the simple collar he had made for Ember. "Go on," he whispered. "This is your home." Ember still didn't move. He looked at Tyler, then at the forest, as if struggling between two worlds. From a distance, a small call echoed, the call of another bobcat. Ember's ears perked up. He listened, head tilted to one side. The call sounded again, closer this time. It was the call of his kind, of freedom, of the wild nature that nothing could fully tame. With a decisive movement, Ember jumped out of the cage. He paused for a moment, turning back to look at Tyler one last time. Amber eyes met the teenager's eyes, a moment of connection transcending the boundary between human and beast. Then Ember turned away, running toward the call. Though still slightly limping, he moved with the grace and speed of a true predator. He stopped at the forest edge, looked back once more, then disappeared into the deep green shadows of the trees. Tyler stood there, tears silently streaming down his cheeks, but through those tears he smiled. Because this wasn't a sad ending, but a new beginning, for Ember, and for him too. Bradford placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder. "You did the right thing. He belongs here," Tyler nodded, wiping his tears. "I know, We'll miss him, and he will remember you," Bradford said. "Creatures like Ember never forget those who save their lives." A month later, Jack was discharged from the hospital, his leg beginning to heal. Tyler's mother flew in to take him home. She was surprised to see the change in her son, no longer the angry, rebellious child, but a calm and confident young man. And she was even more surprised when Tyler refused to go home. "I want to stay with Grandpa," he said, "at least for this summer. He needs help with his leg, and I still have a lot to learn from him." His mother looked at Jack, then back at her son. She saw the new connection between grandfather and grandson and understood that something important had happened in these months. "What happened to you?" she asked, unable to hide her smile. Tyler looked out the window toward the distant mountains. "I met a teacher," he said simply. And that was the truth. Ember had taught him lessons no school could teach, about unconditional love, about resilience in adversity, and about the beauty of being free. One late afternoon, as Tyler was helping Jack repair the porch, he saw a movement at the forest edge. A bobcat was standing there watching. Though distant, Tyler still recognized those brilliant amber eyes. "Grandpa," Tyler called softly, pointing. Jack looked, smiling. "He's come back to say thanks." Ember stood there for a long while, watching them from a safe distance. Then, as if nodding goodbye, he turned and disappeared into the forest. Not forever, just until the next visit. Tyler knew that Ember was living the life he was born to live. And thanks to Ember, he had found his path too. Next fall, he would return to school, but with a new goal: to study animal biology and conservation. Perhaps someday he would follow in Jack's footsteps, becoming a protector for creatures who couldn't speak up for themselves. As night fell, Tyler sat on the porch with Jack, listening to the calls of wild creatures in the deep forest. Somewhere in the darkness, Ember was listening too, a free spirit, a friend, a teacher. And Tyler knew that no matter where life took him, a part of him would always belong here, to this wilderness where he had learned the true meaning of love, sacrifice, and courage. Where he had learned to let go to allow someone or something to soar. A bobcat and a rebellious boy, both wounded, both lost. But together, they had found their way home.